My name is Mohammed Layiq Sediqi, the father of Holophase. We continue our story from where we left off in the previous episode. In episode 1, we stepped back from everyday life and asked a question that sounds simple but cuts very deep. What is real? Not what is helpful right now, not what feels meaningful to me, but what is the actual fabric of existence that has been testing life on Earth for 4 billion years. We looked at life itself as one long experiment, one unbroken thread of survival, in which only patterns that fit the real structure of the world manage to continue. We also saw that human science is not outside that story. It is the latest move in the game. Cells learn to sense. Animals learn to remember. Nervous systems learn to predict. Brains learn to build internal models. Humans added another layer. We began to write our models down, compare them, and deliberately test them against the world. Science is life becoming explicit about what it thinks reality is. By the end of the previous episode, we had arrived at the dominant modern story, that everything is, in the end, energy in space-time. The universe, we are told, is made of fields and particles that carry energy and momentum, all living on a four-dimensional fabric called space-time. Stars, planets, atoms, cells, brains, thoughts, and even you listening to this right now are supposed to be complicated arrangements of that single basic stuff. Today, in episode 2, we are going to walk inside that story slowly and carefully. We will not treat it as an enemy. We will treat it as one of the greatest achievements of human thought. And then we will ask a quiet but dangerous question that almost nobody says out loud. Is this really the end of the road? Or is energy in space-time itself a brilliant map of something deeper but not the territory? Holophase can only matter if it deals honestly with the very best existing picture of reality. It must respect its successes. It must show where that picture quietly stops making sense as an ontological claim. And it must be testable. It must be fragile. It must be killable by experiment if it is wrong. Otherwise, it is just another beautiful story. So I want you to imagine that we are walking together through a vast museum of human ideas about reality. Each hall holds a different answer to the question, what is the world made of? Now, we will stroll past the oldest rooms and then stop in front of the modern exhibit labeled Energy and Space-Time. We will admire it, we will see why it is so compelling, and then, very gently, we will notice the cracks. Only after that, in later episodes, will we begin to bring in Phi, the Holophase, as a serious alternative starting point. Let us begin our museum tour. In the first room, reality is explained in personal terms. Thunder is the anger of a sky god. A flood is the mood of a river spirit. Illness is a curse, or an intrusion of some unseen being. The world is populated not by forces and fields, but by intentions. The forest has moods. The wind has a will. The sky can be pleased or offended. This picture made the world emotionally inhabitable. It told people that behind chaos there was a kind of mind. But it did not give us precise, testable predictions. It was more like a comforting drama than a measuring instrument. We move to the next hall, the Greek wing. Here we see the first attempts to ask, what is the one underlying stuff of everything? Thales says water. Anaximenes says air. Heraclitus says fire and ceaseless change. The Pythagoreans say number and ratio. Then Democritus and Leucippus step forward with a radically new proposal, atoms in the void. In their view, reality is a huge collection of tiny, invisible, indestructible particles moving through empty space. Color, taste, smell, warmth, they say, are not truly in the atoms. They belong to our experience. The atoms themselves are just little bits of shape and motion. What we feel is secondary. This is the birth of a new idea. What you experience directly is not what really exists at the fundamental level. We then walk into the hall of the scientific revolution. Galileo rolls balls down ramps and times their motion. Newton writes his laws of motion and universal gravitation. Matter in motion becomes the central image. The universe is pictured as particles moving in an absolute space, pushed and pulled by forces. If you know the positions and velocities of all particles and the forces between them, you can, in principle, calculate the entire future and the entire past. This is the clockwork universe. Notice what has happened. The basic furniture of the universe is now matter and space. Time is a cosmic clock that ticks the same everywhere. Energy is already a useful quantity in mechanics, but it has not yet become the star of the show. What is real in this picture is hard stuff moving in a container. We step into the next room, the age of engines and fields. Steam engines are being built, heat drives pistons. Motion is turned into electricity. Electricity is turned into light. On the surface, these processes look different, but when physicists do the accounting, a single type of numerical quantity keeps appearing. They give it a name, energy. They discover that if they calculate energy carefully in all its forms and include everything, the total number stays the same. Heat plus mechanical work plus electrical work plus radiation all balance out. This leads to the famous principle: energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. At the same time, Faraday and Maxwell unify electricity and magnetism into a single electromagnetic field permeating space. A field is not a little bead flying around. It is something smooth that has a value at every point. Waves of light turn out to be ripples in this field. The picture sharpens. Now we have matter and fields, both living in space and time, carrying and exchanging energy. We write energy as a mathematical expression built from masses, velocities, charges, field strengths, and so on. We find that in every controlled experiment, energy is conserved. This is not a small fact. It is one of the deepest discoveries in physics. Then Einstein arrives and reshapes the stage itself. Special relativity fuses space and time into space-time. General relativity bends that space-time in the presence of mass and energy. Gravity is no longer a mysterious pull acting across empty space. It is the geometry of space-time itself. Matter tells space-time how to curve. Curved space-time tells matter how to move. Einstein also gives us the famous relation between mass and energy. Mass, which we used to think of as a primitive measure of how much matter you have, becomes a form of energy. The old separation between mass and energy collapses. The ontology compresses further. Many people begin to say the fundamental reality is energy in space-time. Everything else is just a particular pattern in that basic stuff. Quantum theory then arrives and complicates everything, but also deepens the role of energy. Quantum field theory describes particles as excitations of underlying fields. These fields carry energy. They live on space-time. Feynman diagrams show interactions as exchanges that conserve energy and momentum at every vertex. The old dream of atoms in the void has become fields and quanta in space-time, governed by probability rules, but still using energy as the universal currency. From the point of view of practical physics, this picture works astonishingly well. It gives us transistors, lasers, GPS, nuclear power, superconductors, precision clocks, modern chemistry, and a detailed cosmology. It has survived more experimental tests than any other picture of the world we have ever had. So if this story is so successful, what right do we have to question it? Why not simply say, this is reality, end of discussion? The answer is subtle. Success in prediction does not automatically mean that your chosen ontology is final. A map can be extremely good at guiding travelers without being made of the same stuff as the land. A musical score can perfectly encode a symphony without being made of air and vibration. A financial ledger can track every transaction without being money itself. Energy and space-time may be like these things, an extraordinarily accurate representation, but not the underlying medium. Let us look more closely at energy first. When physicists compute energy, they never measure pure energy directly. They always calculate it from other measured quantities. For a moving object, kinetic energy is 1/2 times mass times velocity squared. For a lifted weight, gravitational potential energy is mass times gravitational acceleration times height. For a spring, it is 1/2 times the spring constant times extension squared. For a hot gas, thermal energy is related to the average motion of molecules, or to temperature and heat capacity. For electromagnetic fields, energy is calculated by integrating field strength squared over space. In every case, energy is a number we compute from more primitive observables: distances, times, frequencies, charges, currents, amplitudes. It is not a directly measured substance. It is a summary constructed from more basic readings. To make this vivid, imagine a crowded playground. Children are running, swinging, climbing, shouting. You decide you want a single number that describes how lively the playground is right now. So you invent a rule. For each child who is sitting still, you assign 0 points. For each child walking, 1 point. For each child running, 2 points. For each child on a swing, 3 points. You do a quick count and add up all the points. The result is, say, 57 units of liveliness. This liveliness score is very useful. You can compare different times of day. You can see whether the playground is busier on weekends or weekdays. You might even find that this number stays surprisingly stable in certain conditions, but you know that liveliness in this sense is not a substance. It is a tally you defined. Energy in the strict operational sense is like that. It is a very carefully defined, extremely constrained, deeply universal tally built from more basic relations. It is far more rigorous than our playground example, because in physics the rules for computing it are tied to symmetries in the laws of motion. But the structural point is the same. Energy is a number that summarizes something deeper. It is not a little fluid that flows through the world. This matters because when people say everything is energy, they often speak as if energy were the ontic substance of reality. But our own equations whisper something different. They say energy is a conserved score attached to configurations of something else. In the Holophase program, when we write the full mathematics, energy appears as a particular way of counting patterns and changes in a deeper phase field phi. It is indispensable as a tool, but it is not the base layer. It is a derived quantity. Now let us look with the same honesty at space-time. In common language, we often talk as if space were a big invisible box that holds things, and time were a flowing river carrying moments from past to future. In relativity, we upgrade this intuitive picture into a four-dimensional space-time with a metric that can bend and stretch. It is tempting to imagine this space-time as a kind of elastic fabric, with planets and stars making dents in it. But again, what do we actually measure? We set up clocks and rulers, or their modern replacements. We send signals and record when they arrive. We compare readings between different observers in motion relative to each other. From all this relational data, we infer that there is a consistent geometric structure that can be described using coordinates and a metric. We call that structure space-time. Space-time, in this sense, is a relational pattern we extract from measurements. It is not a substance we scoop up. It is a way of organizing the relationships between events so that we can describe them compactly and predictably. Modern research on quantum gravity suggests that this geometric structure may itself be emergent. In some approaches, space-time arises from patterns of quantum entanglement. In others, it emerges from discrete combinatorial structures. The details differ, but the shared idea is that continuous space-time may be like the smooth surface of a liquid, hiding a deeper microstructure that is not itself spatial or temporal. If that is true, then saying reality is energy in space-time is like saying water is its smooth surface. It captures something real, but it may mistake a high-level appearance for a fundamental ingredient. There is another crack, and it comes from the quantum world. At very small scales, reality behaves in ways that do not fit the classical picture. We have wave functions that assign complex amplitudes to possibilities. We have interference experiments where what matters is the relative phase between different paths. We have entangled states where measurement outcomes are correlated in ways that no simple local model can explain. In practice, quantum theory is used as a tool to compute probabilities. Many physicists avoid taking a strong stand on what the wave function is. Is it a physical field? Is it information? Is it a bookkeeping device? Is it something else? A common attitude is, the theory works, do not ask too many questions. This is sometimes summarized as shut up and calculate, but if we look at what the formalism and the experiments actually use, again and again, we see one theme, phase. In a double-slit experiment, what decides where the bright and dark fringes fall on the screen is not just how much energy each particle carries. It is the phase difference between the alternative paths. In classical optics, if you want to understand interference, diffraction, holography, you do not imagine tiny bullets. You track a complex field with an amplitude and a phase. That phase, winding around in cycles, is what shapes the observed pattern. The same is true in many other areas: superconductivity, superfluidity, lasers, interference of matter waves, Berry phases, topological insulators. The quantities that show up in the heart of the equations are not bare energy blobs. They are phase factors, oscillations, winding numbers, coherence measures. So we arrive at attention. On the one hand, our high-level story confidently says reality is energy in space-time. On the other hand, our low-level measurement language whispers what you directly manipulate and observe are structured rhythms and phases. Holophase starts right at that tension. It does not deny the power of energy and space-time as concepts. It does not pretend that the last century of physics did not happen. Instead, it asks, what if these concepts are not the foundations, but the shadows? What if they are elegant summaries projected by something deeper? A single cyclic field phi whose differences and derivatives give rise to time, space, motion, fields, energy, matter, and information as different ways of reading it. If that is so, then we have been confusing the ledger with the coins, the score with the music, the map with the ground. We have been starting our ontology one layer too high, but we do not get to simply assert this and smile. Holophase must confront experiment as directly as any other theory. Any deeper ontology has to pass two ruthless tests. First, it must reproduce everything that the current energy and space-time based theories get right to within experimental accuracy. Planetary motion, atomic spectra, particle collisions, laser behavior, superconducting circuits, cosmological data, all of it. If Holophase cannot recover these when spelled out mathematically, it is wrong. Second, it must make new, risky, quantitative predictions or constraints that are not already implied by existing theories. It must say, if phi really is the substrate, then certain relations must hold, certain inequalities must not be violated, certain patterns must appear or fail to appear in specific experiments. These are the sharp edges where Holophase can be cut. If those predictions fail, Holophase must be abandoned or radically changed. This is why falsifiability is not decoration in this project. It sits at the core. A model that cannot, in principle, be killed by data is not a model of reality. It is a story. Holophase insists on being more than a story. In later episodes, we will talk in detail about how this is implemented, about windows, visibility, encoders, Cramer-Rao bounds, dual reconstruction pipelines, and a global falsification ledger. For now, I just want you to hold the attitude. This theory is not protected. It has its neck exposed to experiment. Before we finish this episode, I want to touch one more layer, the emotional side of this crisis. If you ask many scientifically educated people today what the universe is, they will answer something like this. It is a vast space-time filled with quantum fields and energy, obeying elegant equations. Everything else you care about, life, mind, meaning, love, is ultimately an arrangement of those basic ingredients. On one level, this can feel satisfying. There is a single, clear, unified picture. On another level, it can feel like a quiet flattening of everything rich in our experience into just complicated excitations of an indifferent substrate. Holophase does not run away from that tension. It does something slightly different. It accepts that the universe is rhythmic and oscillatory, but it changes what we mean by fundamental. It asks us to shift our starting point from stuff in a container to one global rhythm read in many ways. That shift opens a path to seeing physics, information, life, and mind as different aspects of the same phase structure, instead of as separate layers glued onto energy in space-time. You might ask, is this just a change of language, or does it actually change anything? That is a fair question. The answer lies in the technical details, which we will unfold step by step. When you rebase everything on phi, you change what must be conserved, how locality works, how fields and matter are encoded, and how probability and information arise. These differences show up in concrete proposals for experiments. They also show up in the way we think about extreme situations, like black holes, the early universe, or highly entangled many-body systems. The full mathematical and experimental framework behind these ideas is not light reading. It is written across more than 30 rigorous scientific papers that I have begun to publish on platforms such as Zenodo. In the description of these episodes, I will share links to some of those papers so that, if you wish, you can see the detailed equations, proofs, and proposed experiments that sit behind this audio series. The voice you are hearing now is built on that written foundation. For this introductory journey, however, I want you to have something else, a clear, simple, honest picture that you can carry in your own thinking. You do not need to memorize formulas. You do not need to become a specialist. You only need to be willing to let go of the feeling that our current story, everything is energy in space-time, is obviously final. So let me compress this entire episode into one sentence. The old story says everything is energy in space-time. This episode has shown that energy is a conserved tally computed from deeper quantities. Space-time is a relational geometry inferred from measurements and possibly emergent, and both may be high-level summaries of a more primitive phase-based structure. In the next episode, we will begin to say what that deeper structure is. We will introduce phi, the holophase, as a single cyclic field whose differences and derivatives generate everything else. We will explain what it means to live in a phi-closed world, how something earns the right to be called real in such a world, and how falsifiability is baked in from the very first definition. For now, take a breath. Look around you, feel your own body, the sounds around you, the flow of your day. Notice how nothing obvious has changed, and yet the background story you inherited is no longer quite as solid. That slight movement in the frame is where revolutions in science begin. They do not start with loud slogans. They start with quiet questions. My name is Mohammed Layiq Sediqi, the father of Holophase. Thank you for walking this part of the path with me. In the next episode, we will begin to build the new ontology, step by step, from the ground of phase itself, and we will invite reality, through experiment, to decide whether this new starting point is worthy of survival. Before we close completely, let me give you one more way to picture what is happening when we move from the energy in space-time story to the holophase view. Imagine standing in a dark concert hall during a rehearsal. At first, the only thing you see is the glowing screen of the sound engineer's computer at the back. On that screen are graphs, levels, frequencies, waveforms, meters jumping up and down. The engineer can do an incredible amount with those graphs. They can balance the mix, catch problems, predict feedback before it happens. In a sense, they can almost see the concert without hearing it. Now imagine that you are allowed to walk from the back of the hall to the stage. As you get closer, you begin to hear the orchestra itself. You hear strings, brass, woodwinds, percussion. You feel the pressure of the sound in your body. You realize that the graphs at the back were a representation, a compressed view of something richer and more immediate, the living, vibrating air in the hall. The traditional picture of energy in space-time is a bit like the view from the sound engineer's screen. It is calculated, powerful, predictive, and abstract. The holophase view is like walking onto the stage and focusing on the underlying vibration itself. The ledgers and graphs are not wrong. They are shadows of something more primary, the oscillation, the phase, the pattern of how peaks and troughs line up. Or think about digital video. On your phone, a movie looks like smooth motion, a continuous stream of images. Underneath, there are compressed packets, codes, and hidden structures that decide how that movie is stored and transmitted. Most of the time, you never worry about them. You just watch. But if you are designing a new codec or diagnosing strange glitches, you must drop down to that deeper level of representation and understand how the code really works. In a similar way, Holophase asks us to drop one level down in our thinking. Instead of treating energy and space-time as the final picture, we treat them as an extremely successful compression of the behavior of a deeper phase field. We are, in a sense, moving from watching the movie to opening the file and reading the code. This shift is not about mystery, it is about clarity. It is about accepting that the things we have been calling fundamental may themselves be generated by something still more basic, and then having the courage to spell that something out and offer it to experiment. You might feel a certain resistance to this. Part of you might say, why not be satisfied? The current theories work so well. Why open the box? That reaction is understandable. But if you look back at the history we just walked through, you will see that every major step forward began with someone refusing to treat the current map as sacred. When people first said the Earth might be moving around the sun, they were not trying to disrespect the old cosmology. They were trying to explain the same data in a cleaner, more unified way. When people first said that heat was not a substance called phlogiston, but the motion of molecules, they were not trying to destroy the usefulness of old experiments. They were trying to understand why those experiments worked at all. Holophase stands in that same tradition. It is not a rebellion against energy or spacetime. It is an attempt to explain why they appear, why they work, why they are so tightly linked to symmetry and conservation. It is a proposal that behind them lies a single, cyclic, phase-based structure, whose patterns we can, in principle, measure, test, and use to rebuild the entire tower of physics and beyond. So, as you finish this episode, I invite you to hold two images at once. In one hand, hold the energy in space-time picture, the fields, the particles, the curves of space-time, the conservation laws, the incredible match to experiment. Do not throw it away. It is too hard won. In the other hand, hold the quiet possibility that this whole framework is itself a projection of something deeper, one global rhythm, phi, whose local differences and derivatives can be read as the time, space, motion, fields, energies, and information that we are used to. Between those two images, there is a tension, and in that tension, there is creative power. That is the space in which Holophase lives. In the next episode, we will begin to make that second image precise. We will take the word phi and turn it from a symbol in your imagination into something operational, a quantity you can, in principle, reconstruct from data on finite windows with explicit limits on precision using independent methods that must agree. We will begin to spell out what it means to say that the world is phi-closed. Until then, simply notice how it feels to walk around in your normal life knowing that the phrase, everything is energy in space-time, is not the neutral truth of the universe, but one layer in a longer story. That awareness alone already creates room for a new ontology to grow. Thank you again for listening, for thinking, and for being willing to stand at this edge with me. The journey is only beginning. Together we will keep testing, questioning, refining, and listening to reality.